Joining us here in person, candidate for President of the United States and Senator from Texas, Ted Cruz. Senator Cruz, welcome on to the Michael Koolidge Show.
Michael, it's great to be with you. God bless you.
Yes, God bless you as well. And first question I ask every presidential candidate, what do you see as the duties of President of the United States, and why do you, Ted Cruz, want to be the next President of the United States?
Well, the duties of the President of the United States are to honor and defend the Constitution of the United States, to protect our national security, and to fight for the people of America. I think America's in crisis right now. I think the stakes facing this election are unlike the stakes we've ever seen before. We are bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Our constitutional rights are under assault from Washington like never before. And America has receded from leadership in the world, and the result is the world is a much, much more dangerous place. I'm running on three big principles. Number one, to bring back jobs and growth and opportunity. And the way you do so is through tax reform and regulatory reform. Tax reform. The best tax reform is a simple flat tax where every American can fill out his or her taxes on a postcard. And when we do that, we should abolish the IRS. And regulatory reform, stopping the locusts of federal regulators who have descended on small businesses and farms and ranches, whether it's the EPA or the CFPB or the Department of Labor or OSHA. And the most important regulatory reform is we need to repeal every word of Obamacare. If I am elected president, mark my words, we will repeal Obamacare.
Many of our listeners are Republican primary voters. They'll be voting in the March primary. A couple of our listeners in eastern Iowa will be voting a little earlier than that. Make the case to Republican primary voters that you're not just the most conservative of the candidates, but have the best shot at winning the general election in the fall.
Well, general election is an interesting question. One of the maddening things in politics is there's this group of consultants in Washington who keep running national campaigns, and they keep losing. And they keep coming back to Republicans saying, support us again while we make the exact same mistakes over and over again. Michael, I think the stakes are too high to do that. I'm a numbers and data guy. Before I was in the Senate, I was a U.S. Supreme Court litigator. I represented the state of Texas and Fortune 500 companies in bet the company litigation, and we won over and over and over again. I'm interested in winning. There is no question that matters more than how do we win the general election in November 2016. If you look to the data, if you look to the numbers, and you compare 2004, the last race we won nationally, to 08 and 12, by far the biggest difference is the millions of conservatives who showed up in 2004, who stayed home in 08, and stayed home in bigger numbers in 12. And they fall basically into two categories. Number one, evangelical Christians. There are about 90 million evangelicals in America, about 30% of the population. In the last election, 54 million evangelicals stayed home. A majority of evangelicals, they vote 80-20 Republican when they show up, and 54 million stayed home. The second major group are the so-called Reagan Democrats. They tend to be blue-collar Catholics across the Midwest and up into New England. Showed up in massive numbers in 04, stayed home in 08, stayed home in even bigger numbers in 12. There is no question that's more important than how do you bring back the millions of conservatives to Election Day in 2016. And Michael, I'll tell you the process that my wife Heidi and I went through deciding to run. She and I spent a lot of months thinking about it, praying about it. We've got two little girls. Our daughters, Catherine and Caroline, are 4 and 7. You don't lightly throw a young family into the maelstrom that is a presidential campaign. The single factor that more than anything led us to go forward is I look at the other candidates, the senators and governors. They're good people. They're people who I like and respect. But there are not a lot of candidates who I think are likely to energize and mobilize and inspire the millions of conservatives who've been staying home. And I think of all the candidates in the field, I'm in the best position to do that, to energize and bring them back, but also to reassemble that old Reagan coalition, to bring together conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians, to bring together young people. We've got an army of young people supporting our campaign, to bring together Hispanics. I won 40% of the Hispanic vote in the state of Texas at the exact same time Mitt Romney was getting clobbered with Hispanics, to bring together women and Reagan Democrats. We're seeing that coalition come together, and it's because people are tired of campaign conservatives, people who talk a good game on the campaign trail but don't walk the walk. They're looking for a consistent conservative who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
You mentioned consistency, and I respect that a lot in politicians. Your support for Operation Iraqi Freedom over the years. I'm a OIF 1 veteran from the very beginning. I was very supportive of the war, and I still am.
Yeah.
We've seen some of the other candidates kind of go back and forth with the wins. Describe your opinion about it then, in the middle of it, and now.
Well, let me start with principles and then go to the specifics.
Sure.
The principles that should govern U.S. foreign policy and military action. The touchstone should always be the vital U.S. national security interest. That's something the Obama-Clinton administration is terrible at. They rarely even begin to examine our national security interest, much less make decisions based upon them. If and when military force is required, we should begin with a clearly defined objective. We should go in with overwhelming force, and then we should get the heck out. I do not think it is the job of the U.S. military to engage in nation building, to transform foreign nations into democratic utopias. It is the job of our military to hunt down and kill our enemies before they can murder innocent American citizens. Now, when it comes to the war on Iraq, we now know that the intelligence was faulty. I was not in Congress at the time, so I did not participate in those classified briefings. I don't know what was contained in the classified briefings at the time. I think anyone would say, if we knew what we knew now, that by all appearances Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction, that it was a mistake to go into Iraq. That if we knew what we knew that now, then we would not have made the decision to go in.
But that's impossible, of course, to know, right? I mean, it's like any other,
Look, hindsight is always 20/20.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you don't learn from hindsight, looking at, okay, why was the intelligence faulty? What did we believe? Did we just hear what we wanted to hear? What did we do wrong? And beyond that, you look at the criteria I laid out, beginning with a clearly defined objective. When it came to Iraq, I don't think there ever was a clearly defined objective, and so it resulted in us staying in perpetuity and starting to try to transform that nation. We should not be invading nations and staying there for decades. We should be. So let's take, for example, two current threats. Number one, ISIS. We have a commander-in-chief who is not serious about defeating ISIS. In the first Persian Gulf War, there were 1,100 airstrikes a day. You know how many airstrikes we're doing right now against ISIS? Between 15 and 30 a day. It is photo-op foreign policy. If I am elected president as commander-in-chief, I will make abundantly clear, we will destroy ISIS. If you're a militant anywhere in the world and you go and join ISIS, you take up arms and declare jihad against America to murder innocent Americans, you are signing your death warrant. That a commander-in-chief can do. Now, I do not think it is our role after ISIS is destroyed to go in and build 1,000 schools all across that region. That is the challenge for other civilizations, not for ours. Likewise, when it comes to Iran, if I'm elected as president and commander-in-chief, under no circumstances will Iran be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. Why? Because they're led by a theocratic Ayatollah who pledges death to America. But the fact that we would do whatever it takes to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons does not remotely mean we should invade or occupy going forward.
Senator Ted Cruz, anything else you'd like to add to listeners throughout the great state of Illinois and eastern Iowa before we say goodbye?
Well, I will say I am so encouraged by what we're seeing. You know, in the 2 weeks since the last debate, we've seen incredible momentum. Our support has exploded. In the first 100 hours after the debate, we raised $1.1 million. People all over the country going to tedcruz.org, contributing, volunteering. We did a bus tour across 7 states. We had over 19,000 people come out to the bus tour. People are energized and excited. And I think the reason is they're fed up with politicians who say one thing and do another. Every one of us has seen it over and over and over again. And the reason we're seeing so much energy and support is what I've tried to do in office more than anything else is 2 things. Tell the truth and do what I said I would do. And we are seeing an explosion of support. I would encourage your listeners, come to our website, tedcruz.org, sign up online, contribute, speak out, get on Facebook, get on Twitter. We are building a grassroots army. And just like in 1980 in the Reagan Revolution, we are seeing another movement from the people. Just as it took Jimmy Carter to give us Ronald Reagan, I believe Barack Obama is setting the stage for a new generation of leaders in the Republican Party who stand for liberty, who stand for the Constitution, and it's going to come from the people.
Senator Ted Cruz, thank you so much for coming onto the Michael Koolidge Show. Best of luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you, and God bless you.